The bedroom is a cavern of shadows, swallowed by the suffocating weight of the small hours. It is 3 a.m. The world outside, usually a cacophony of ambition and distraction, has surrendered to the silence. In this stillness, there is no place to hide. The digital glow of the smartphone has been extinguished. The relentless hum of social expectation has ebbed away. You lie rigid, staring at the ceiling, a white, featureless expanse that reflects the emptiness of the day you have just discarded. Somewhere in the dark, you feel it. It is not a sound, but a pulse. It is the cold, sharp ache of a promise broken, a silent, gnawing realization that your hands are empty despite the frantic motion of your hours. Consider the paradox. You are exhausted, yet you are not satisfied. You have spent 16 hours in the friction of the world, answering calls, chasing metrics, and navigating the social theater. Yet you are haunted by the gnawing suspicion that you have moved nowhere. You are like a ship caught in a gyre, plenty of sail, plenty of wind, but the anchor remains lodged in the silt of the harbor. You are the architect of your own discontent, and in this quiet hour, the architect must finally face the structure he has built. It is not the failure of your circumstances that keeps you awake. It is the haunting recognition of the capacity you left dormant. The music is still locked within the instrument. The ink remains in the bottle. The clock is not merely a device for measuring time. It is a ticking countdown of potential being traded for the illusion of activity. The night air feels heavy with the weight of unharvested genius, and for the first time, you are forced to witness the terrifying divide between the person you present to the world and the titan you know resides beneath the surface. This pervasive anxiety, this canyon of regret, is not a character flaw. It is a fundamental architectural failure of the modern psyche. To understand why you feel this disconnect, one must apply the rigors of recursive inquiry. Why does this gap exist? It exists because of a systematic confusion between motion and advancement. Society has conditioned the human mind to equate perspiration with progress. We have been raised in a cult of visibility, where the man who is seen working is perceived as the man who is winning. However, biology and physics dictate otherwise. A river that flows without banks, without the structure of a defined channel, does not power a city. It becomes a swamp. It is vast, it is present, it is active, but it is stagnant. The swamp of your own life is the result of diffused intent. You feel anxiety because your energy, which is a finite and sacred resource, is being leaked through 1,000 tiny holes of distraction. How does the mind lose its sovereignty? The mind is a predatory engine. It is designed to seek, to hunt, and to focus. When it is denied a singular, definite target, it turns its predatory gaze inward, feeding upon itself. This is the origin of the loop of intention. You start the day with a vague desire for change, but without a structural mandate, the mind defaults to the path of least resistance, reaction. You react to the notification. You react to the email. You react to the crisis of others. By reacting, you cede your position as the commander of your time to the whims of the environment. The psychological cost of this is profound. Every time you promise yourself a change and fail to manifest it, you erode the foundation of your self-trust. You are not lazy, you are underdirected. The laziness you perceive in yourself is merely the subconscious mind's way of refusing to engage in work that it senses is meaningless. It is a rebellion of your highest faculties against the banality of your tasks. True performance requires the realignment of identity with action. You must stop trying to manage time, for time is not a commodity that can be held. It is a flow that must be directed. The canyon between who you are and who you could be is bridged only by the terrifying act of defining the one thing and incinerating everything else that competes for your focus. In the high mountains of an ancient kingdom, there lived a master stonecutter named Elian. Elian was commissioned by the king to build a cathedral that would pierce the clouds, a structure so monumental it would hold the history of the realm within its pillars. Elian began with a singular vision. He spent his first week not touching a single stone, but sitting in the dust of the foundation site, sketching the geometry of the arches upon the earth. The villagers mocked him. They saw his neighbors, other builders, frantically hauling rock, slapping mortar against brick, and building walls that grew rapidly in height. By the end of the month, the neighbors had small, crooked huts, while Elian had only a series of lines in the dirt. They whispered that he was a dreamer, a man of idle talk. But Elian was possessed by a secret law. He knew that the weight of a cathedral requires a foundation that accounts for the pressure of the heavens. When the rains came, the huts of his neighbors, built in haste and without a design, began to shift and crack. The mortar, applied with enthusiasm but without structural coherence, crumbled under the first true test of the wind. Elian then began to work. He did not build with haste, he built with rhythm. He placed one stone at a time, each one aligned with the master sketch he had etched in his mind. He worked until the sun reached the zenith, and then he paused, not because he was tired, but to ensure his rhythm remained unbroken. He did not look at his neighbor's speed. He looked only at the cathedral that existed in his mind. 2 years passed. The neighbors had long since abandoned their crumbling huts, moving from site to site, chasing the next quick job. Elian's cathedral, however, had reached the heavens. It was a masterpiece of order. When the king finally stood beneath the vaulted ceilings, he did not ask how long it took. He marveled at the inevitability of it. Elian had not worked harder than the others. He had simply refused to lay a brick that did not serve the finished vision. His life was not a series of frantic repetitions, but a steady, deliberate climb. He had transformed his days into a bridge that connected his intention to his monument. You have sat in the dark long enough. The canyon of regret is not your home. It is the threshold. To cross it, you must begin to treat your time as the most sacred capital you possess. Your immediate integration. Do not wait for the sun to rise to begin the practice of the master. Tonight, before you lay your head down, you are to perform the audit of the day. Take a physical piece of paper, not a digital device, for the glow of the screen is the enemy of reflection, and write down the single, most important action that would have made today a victory. Be brutally honest. If you cannot identify one, you have drifted. If you can, write it down as a command to be executed tomorrow. By committing it to paper, you move the thought from the chaos of your mind to the physical reality of the world. You are no longer drifting. You are anchoring your intention. You have now begun the work of the builder. You have taken the first step away from the swamp of reaction and toward the river of dominance. But a plan is merely a static map. To turn that map into a journey, you must understand how to guard the gates of your focus. There is a silent thief that waits at the threshold of every morning, a force that seeks to strip you of your clarity before you even leave your room. In the next chapter, we shall unveil the secret that the industrial titans of history used to ensure that no triviality could ever breach their mental walls. We move from the what of your purpose to the how of your work. The laws are ready. The architecture is prepared. Are you ready to see what happens when a mind becomes as sharp as a laser? The ascent continues. Observe the modern marketplace. It is a theater of frantic pantomime. Behold the man at the mahogany desk, surrounded by the electronic hum of blinking lights, his brow furrowed with the manufactured intensity of a general commanding a failing army. He is everywhere at once. He is tethered to the infinite ping of the inbox. He is hostage to the siren call of the real-time news cycle. He is a blur of kinetic energy. He rises with the sun, his schedule a mosaic of appointments, meetings, and obligations. He is moving, he is vibrating, he is exhausted. To the uninitiated observer, he is the model of productivity. Yet, watch him as the sun dips below the horizon. As the office lights dim, the theater closes, and the actor is left alone with his script. In that solitary hour, he realizes with a chilling clarity that the stage has been empty all along. He has been running with the ferocity of a gazelle, yet he has not covered a single inch of ground. He is a rocking chair, an endless, exhausting, rhythmic motion that produces nothing but friction. He has mistaken the noise of the machinery for the fruits of the harvest. This is the great deception of our age, the worship of activity over achievement. We are a generation drugged by the sensation of being busy. We mistake the rapid movement of our fingers across a keyboard for the forging of a legacy. But movement is not progress. A leaf caught in a gale moves with terrifying speed, yet it is a prisoner of the wind, landing wherever chance dictates. The man who lacks a definite aim is that leaf. He is a servant to the momentum of the day, his genius scattered like sand across the desert, illuminating everything but heating nothing. His tragedy is not that he fails. His tragedy is that he succeeds at being busy while failing to be significant. Why does the human spirit settle for the counterfeit currency of busyness? The answer lies in the psychological refuge that doing things provides. Why do we flee from definiteness? Definiteness requires a terrifying level of commitment. To be definite in one's work is to draw a line in the sand. It is to define what you are, and by necessity, to define what you are not. The ego fears this limitation. It wants to keep all doors ajar, fearing that by choosing one path, it might inadvertently forfeit a treasure hidden on another. We cling to the clutter of minor tasks because it is comfortable. It requires no courage to answer emails. It requires no faith to attend a meaningless meeting. These acts allow us to hide from the existential pressure of our true purpose. If we are doing everything, we are responsible for nothing. How does the principle of definite work transmute this chaos into power? The law of definite work operates on the physics of concentration. Consider the sun. Its rays, when scattered, merely provide a gentle warmth to the earth. But when those same rays are focused through a magnifying glass, they attain a searing, transformative power. This is the mechanism of human potential. To work definitely is to gather the diffuse beams of your consciousness and focus them upon a single point of impact. It is the refusal to tolerate the non-essential. Most men believe that to achieve more, they must do more. The law of definite work posits the exact inverse. To achieve more, you must do less, but with greater intensity. You must strip away the secondary, the tertiary, and the trivial, until you are left with the diamond of your objective. The how of this law is found in the total subordination of action to thought. The laborer begins with the hands. The master begins with the mind. The master knows that the mind is the architect, and the hands are but the tools. If the architect has not defined the blueprint, the tools will merely pile bricks into a heap. Thus, the exercise of definite work is an act of intellectual sovereignty. It is the conscious decision to govern your hours, rather than allowing your hours to dictate your life. When you act without a plan, you are a slave to the moment. When you act from a plan, you are the master of the future. You do not merely work to fill the clock. You invest your time to build the cathedral. History does not remember the frantic. It remembers the focused. Consider the rise of Andrew Carnegie, a man who entered the forge of American industry with nothing but a hunger to dominate one specific domain, the production of steel. At a time when other entrepreneurs were chasing the glitter of gold mines, the promise of textiles, or the volatility of the railroad stocks, Carnegie stood like a mountain. He was not the most frantic man in the room. He did not boast of his sleep deprivation or his frantic pace. He was, by all accounts, a man of eerie composure. He understood a principle that his competitors ignored, that one definite idea, acted upon with the persistence of a falling river, could cut through the hardest steel. One winter, when the market was gripped by a panic, his peers retreated, diversifying their assets and scurrying to safety. Carnegie did the opposite. He used his gathered resources to upgrade his mills, while others were cutting costs to survive. He did not change his aim. He doubled his intensity. He had chosen the steel industry as his altar, and he sacrificed everything to it. His alliances, his reading, his friendships, and his habits were all curated to serve one master, the advancement of the steel empire. While others were changing goals a dozen times before the age of 30, chasing the trends of the market like dogs chasing shadows, Carnegie held to one. The world watched him and called it genius, assuming he possessed some magical insight. In truth, he possessed only the discipline of the excluded. He said no to 1,000 good ideas, so he could say yes to the one that would define his century. He did not build his empire by doing more than other men. He built it by doing the same thing, mastering steel with a level of definiteness that made the chaos of his competitors appear amateurish. He proved that genius is not an intellectual inheritance, but an output of the law of definite work. When the goal is defined, the world has no choice but to step aside. The transition from the drifter to the master begins not with a change in your external circumstances, but with a total overhaul of your internal management. You must cease the frantic movement that masquerades as progress. Your practical integration. Tonight, you are to undergo a nightly counsel. Before you retire, place a blank sheet of paper upon your desk. Do not check your phone. Do not listen to the news. Sit in the silence of your command center and ask the question that will reorganize your entire life. What is the single most important act tomorrow that moves me toward my chief aim? Write it down. Do not just hold it in your consciousness, where it can be lost in the fog of the morning. Capture it in ink. When you write it, you pass the command from the volatile conscious mind into the depths of your subconscious. While your body sleeps, your mind will work upon that plan, organizing the resources of your spirit so that when you wake, you are already moving toward victory. You will not wake up wondering what to do. You will wake up knowing. You will cease to be a reactor and become a commander. You have begun to channel your energy. But remember, a plan is a fragile thing. It is a structure of thought that must be protected from the constant bombardment of the modern world. There is a force in the universe that seeks to shatter your concentration, a thief that works in the light of day to steal your attention. You have defined the why of your work. Now you must discover the law that guards the focus required to execute it. In the next chapter, we descend into the engine room of the soul. We explore the one force that can turn a man into an unstoppable power, a force that most people abandon to the mercy of their distractions. The master key to your attention is waiting. The focus you cultivate in the coming chapters will not just change your output, it will change the very fabric of your reality. The modern morning is a battlefield of unearned demands. Before the sun has even crested the horizon, the silence of your sanctuary is violated by the digital pulse of the world. A chime from a device, the vibration of a notification, the sudden, intrusive glow of a screen. These are the modern barbarians at the gate. You wake, and within seconds, your consciousness is fragmented. You are no longer the sovereign of your own mind. You are a vassal to the urgency of others. Consider the paradox. We live in an age of unprecedented access to information, yet we suffer from an absolute famine of perspective. We are suffocated by the trivial, drowning in a sea of urgent distractions that hold no consequence for our destiny. We start our days by reacting, responding to emails that do not matter, engaging in social currents that lead nowhere, and addressing the crises of people who have no stake in our ultimate potential. Observe the scene. You stand in your kitchen, coffee in hand, staring into the flickering light of a screen. Your jaw is tight, your breath is shallow, and your focus is being pulled in 10 different directions. You are not a commander, you are a responder. Your output for the day has already been compromised before you have even begun the labor of living. You are multitasking, that great sophisticated lie of the modern age. You believe you are building an empire, but you are merely playing a game of mental musical chairs, frantically jumping from one task to the next, leaving nothing finished, nothing mastered, and nothing truly yours. The tragedy is not that you are tired. The tragedy is that your exhaustion is the result of activity that serves everyone's purpose but your own. Why do we allow our lives to be hijacked by the trivial? Why is the human mind so eager to surrender its focus to the noise of the marketplace? Why does the mind reject singular focus? The mind, in its unrefined state, is a creature of fear. It interprets the constant motion of the world as a necessary defense mechanism. We feel that if we are not responding to every stimulus, we are missing a threat or an opportunity. This is a survival instinct vestigial from a time when ignoring a rustle in the grass meant death. But today, the rustle in the grass is merely a ping on your phone. The mind is also addicted to the cheap dopamine of completion, the shallow satisfaction of clearing a notification, the temporary relief of finishing a minor chore. We favor these tiny, meaningless victories because they are easy, and because they allow us to delay the daunting, heavy labor of creating something of true significance. How does the principle of architecture of purpose dismantle this addiction? To create, You must close the doors of your senses. You must become a fortress. The principle of the architecture of purpose is the understanding that productivity is not activity. Productivity is advancement. The men who shape the landscape of history do not treat their time as a calendar to be filled. They treat it as capital to be invested. They allocate it with the cold, surgical precision of an artist who knows that the beauty of the statue lies in the marble he has chiseled away, not the marble he has added. Multitasking is the art of self-sabotage. When you split your attention, you split your power. If you have 10 units of mental energy and you divide them across 10 tasks, you possess 1 unit of strength for each. You are mediocre at 10 things. If you concentrate all 10 units on one task, you possess 10 times the power of the man who splits his effort. You are a titan at one thing. This is the secret of the high performer. He does not try to be everywhere. He chooses to be somewhere, and he stays there until the work is finished. The architecture of purpose requires you to predetermine your aim. You are building a cathedral, not a pile of bricks. A brick thrower cares not where the brick lands, only that he has thrown it. A cathedral builder understands that every single motion must contribute to the strength, the height, and the glory of the final structure. To act with purpose is to reject everything that does not align with your chief aim. It is the practice of intentional exclusion. You do not gain power by gathering more tasks. You gain power by purging the non-essential until your life is a clean, focused beam of directed will. In a land of perpetual heat, there lived an old craftsman who possessed a simple, circular piece of glass. His neighbors were busy people, always rushing to build fires to cook their meals. They spent hours gathering kindling, striking flint, and blowing on embers, their faces red with exertion, their clothes singed, their results flickering and uncertain. They were loud, they were sweaty, and they were always tired. They were the masters of activity. The old craftsman sat in the shade of his porch, his piece of glass in his hand. He did not rush, he did not run, he did not sweat. When he wanted to light his fire, he simply walked into the sunlight, placed his wood upon the stone, and held his glass above it. He did not move his hand. He held it perfectly still, letting the diffused, scattered rays of the sun gather into one tiny, blinding point of white-hot intensity. Within seconds, a wisp of smoke would appear, then a flame, then a roaring fire. His neighbors would gather around him, amazed. "How do you do it?" they asked. "You are so lazy. You sit there in the shade. You move so little, yet your fire is hotter and brighter than any we have ever managed with all our running and striking." The craftsman smiled. "You spend your lives chasing the flame," he said. "You run from flower to flower, from twig to twig, from task to task, believing that motion is the secret to heat. But heat is not born of motion. It is born of concentration. You scatter your strength across 1,000 things, and you create nothing but noise. I gather the power of the universe into a single point, and the work is done for me." The neighbors eventually grew tired of their running. They saw that the craftsman was not lazy. He was the most powerful man in the village. He did not need more wood, more flint, or more breath. He only needed the glass of his focus. He realized that the sun was always shining, and the power was always there, waiting to be directed. He simply had to be still enough to capture it. You have lived as the fire chasers, running in circles, burning your energy on kindling that does not last. The time has come to hold the glass. Tomorrow, you are to declare a fortress hour. You are to identify the one task that truly moves the needle of your life, the task that, if finished, would render the rest of your day merely support work. You are to set a timer for 90 minutes. In that time, you are forbidden from touching your phone, checking your email, or responding to any voice that is not the voice of your own intent. You are to enter a state of deep, undisturbed creation. If a thought arises, a message to send, a person to call, write it down on a piece of paper, but do not act. Keep the glass still. Keep the beam focused. You will find that your mind, starved of its cheap distractions, will initially rebel. It will try to pull you toward the noise. Ignore it. Treat your attention as the most valuable asset you own. If you have nothing else in this world, your attention is your wealth. Guard it. Spend it only where it multiplies. By reclaiming your focus, you are building the mental infrastructure of a high performer. You are preparing your mind to act not as a reactive servant, but as a proactive master. Yet, even with this focus, there is a force that can undermine your success. A subtle, rhythmic resistance that appears the moment you start to make progress. It is the test that every creator must face. How do you maintain this brilliance when the initial excitement fades? How do you ensure that your focus is not just a burst of activity, but a permanent state of being? The bridge to the next level is built on a law that governs the very heartbeat of creation. We move now to the law of rhythmic persistence, the secret that separates the flash in the pan from the titan who endures. The music of your life is about to gain its rhythm. Are you ready to hear it? The world is a marketplace of shadows, and every shadow is a merchant clamoring for the real estate of your mind. Picture yourself sitting in a crowded cafe. The air is thick with the scent of roasted beans and the ambient roar of 100 intersecting lives. Your purpose, your great work, is a delicate, crystalline structure you have placed on the table before you. But look closer. Notice how the atmosphere hums with invisible threads. A bell rings at the door, and for a fleeting second, your eyes dart toward the entrance. A notification pings on the device tucked into your pocket, and your pulse quickens with the phantom urge to check it. A conversation erupts at the table beside you, and your thoughts are instantly kidnapped by the triviality of their discord. It is a paradox of our existence. We possess the most sophisticated cognitive instrument in the known universe, the human mind, yet we leave the gates to this fortress wide open, unguarded, allowing any passing impulse or fleeting sensation to wander in and rearrange our furniture. You are living in a state of continuous partial attention. You are a sentinel who has fallen asleep at his post. You believe you are present, yet your consciousness is being sliced into ribbons by the thousands of micro-distractions that define the modern landscape. The air itself feels heavy with the theft of your focus. Advertisers, politicians, digital interfaces, they are all engaged in a silent, predatory war for your attention. They understand what you have forgotten, that your attention is not merely a cognitive function. It is the currency of creation. Where your attention flows, your life energy follows. If you behold the trivial, you become trivial. If you behold the fragmented, your life becomes a series of disjointed, incoherent shards. You are currently leaking your greatest wealth into the gutters of the marketplace, and you wonder why your dreams remain unmanifested. The tragedy is not that you lack the talent to build your vision. The tragedy is that you have allowed the thieves to pick your pocket before you have even begun the day's work. To master the law of controlled attention, one must first confront the uncomfortable truth of what attention actually is. It is the bridge between the invisible world of thought and the visible world of results. Why does the mind scatter its force? The human brain was evolved for a world of immediate, survival-based stimuli. Our ancestors survived because they were hypersensitive to every change in their environment, the snap of a twig, the shift of a shadow. In the modern world, this hypersensitivity has become a terminal liability. We are suffering from an evolutionarily mismatched reality. We are wired to pay attention to everything, yet the nature of greatness requires the discipline to pay attention to only one thing. We flee into distraction because deep focus, the act of holding a single, complex thought until it matures, is mentally expensive. It requires the combustion of higher-order cognitive fuel. Distraction is cheap. Focus is expensive. The mind, left to its own devices, will always choose the cheap path to preserve energy. How does the principle of controlled attention function as a weapon of mastery? We must employ recursive thinking here. If attention is the bridge, then control is the architect. Control is the deliberate refusal to allow the environment to determine your focus. It is the exercise of sovereignty over the internal landscape. Consider the mechanism of fear and desire. Fear is simply controlled attention focused on disaster. When you worry, you are essentially performing a form of deep visualization. You are building a detailed, sensory-rich, emotional simulation of a future you do not want. You are using your mind to bring that future into existence. Mastery, therefore, is the exact same mechanism deployed in the opposite direction. It is controlled attention, focused on achievement. When you hold an image of your success with unwavering intensity, you are utilizing the same neural machinery you use to worry, but you are directing it toward the creation of a reality that serves you. The mechanism is neutral. The direction is everything. To control your attention is to effectively become the gatekeeper of your own soul. It is the practice of intentional blindness. You must become blind to the urgent, blind to the petty, and blind to the chaos of the masses, so that you may have perfect vision for the path you have chosen. You do not gain power by expanding your focus. You gain power by narrowing it to the point of absolute intensity. This is the physics of the mind. Whatever occupies your attention repeatedly will inevitably manifest in your world. If you feed your mind garbage, you will manifest a garbage life. If you feed your mind pure, definite, and constructive images, you will manifest a life of substance. This is not mysticism. It is the inescapable law of psychological feedback. There was once an industrialist named Marcus, a man whose ambition was as vast as the horizon. He set his heart upon a project that the finest minds of his age declared an absurdity. He intended to cast a massive, complex engine block in a single piece of steel. His engineers, men of great learning and stature, brought him their reports. They showed him the physics, the limitations of the furnace, the impossibility of the mold. They were men of reason, and they brought him the reasons why he should surrender. Marcus listened with a calm that unsettled them. He did not argue with their physics. He simply refused to accept their conclusion. He returned to his workshop and fixed his attention upon the image of the finished engine. For months, he did not look away. When his engineers failed, he did not dwell on the failure. He studied the failure until he found the microscopic flaw in their approach. When others grew restless and suggested he abandon the project for a safer, more profitable venture, Marcus did not even acknowledge their words. His attention was not a resource he shared with the world. It was a fortress he locked. He held his focus steady, like a flame beneath a magnifying glass, for a year, then two. His peers began to call him a fanatic. They whispered that he was losing his grip on reality. In truth, he was the only man present who was fully in contact with reality. He was waiting for the physical world to obey the mental map he had been etching into his consciousness. And then, it happened. A technique, a slight adjustment to the temperature of the pour, a change in the alignment of the steel. The impossible suddenly gave way. The engine block was cast. The skeptics were silenced, not by an argument, but by the undeniable presence of the result. What had the engineers missed? They had the intelligence, the tools, and the data, but they lacked the sustained attention. They had flickered like candles in the wind, while Marcus had burned with the intensity of a sun. He had stayed with the problem longer, seen it more clearly, and refused to let his focus wander until the material world had no choice but to conform to his vision. His triumph was not a victory of labor, it was a victory of concentration. You have squandered your attention as if it were an infinite resource, throwing it at every triviality that crosses your path. Tonight, you begin the restoration of your greatest wealth. You are to practice the anchor exercise. Each morning, upon waking, before the world has a chance to demand a single second of your energy, you must sit in silence for 5 minutes. Choose one single, definite goal, a dream that you have long abandoned to the realm of maybe. Close your eyes, and for those 5 minutes, see it as already done. Hear the sounds of its success. Feel the texture of its completion. If your mind leaps away, as it inevitably will, do not be angry. Simply, gently, and firmly pull it back to the image. Do this for 7 consecutive days. In 1 week, you will begin to notice a shift in your internal state. You will find that you can sustain focus during the day with greater ease, and that the distractions which once derailed you now seem distant and impotent. You are strengthening the muscle of your will. You are teaching your mind that it serves you, not the market. You have now learned how to sharpen the blade and how to focus the beam. But there is a hidden, dangerous wall that every builder eventually hits, the wall of emotional volatility. You have the focus, but do you have the internal rhythm to sustain it when the resistance rises? You have the plan, but do you know how to harmonize your soul with the pulse of the universe? In the next chapter, we descend into the secret of the heartbeat of achievement. We explore the law of rhythmic persistence, the force that turns a burst of inspiration into an eternal light. The rhythm is calling. Do not break the tempo. Imagine a vast, sprawling city at dusk. Thousands of windows are illuminated, each one a different life, a different dream, a different source of noise. From above, the city is a masterpiece of light and motion. From within, it is a chaos of interference. You walk through the streets, and every billboard, every flickering screen, every passerby attempting to catch your eye is a suitor seeking a portion of your spirit. Consider the paradox of the modern observer. We are overwhelmed by the clarity of information, but blinded by the lack of context. We are like a traveler standing in the center of an infinite library, yet we are unable to read a single page because the books are being torn from our hands by 1,000 invisible gusts of wind. The air is thick with the debris of current events, the soot of other people's opinions, and the persistent, low-frequency hum of digital static. The environment you occupy is not neutral. It is predatory. It is designed to fragment your soul into a million pieces so that it can be sold back to you in bits and bytes. You feel it in the agitation of your limbs when you are forced to sit in silence. You feel it in the desperate compulsion to check your reflection in the digital glass, hoping to find a fragment of identity in the stream of vanity. This is the great deception. The belief that being informed and connected is the same as being alive. You are being groomed for mediocrity by a world that fears the focused man. Because the focused man is the one who sees the exit from the maze. The focused man is the one who stops being a consumer of the noise and begins to be the architect of the silence. To master the environment is to understand the geography of your own consciousness. You must view your mind as a citadel, a high-walled fortress that stands in the middle of a war-torn plain. Why is the environment so hostile to greatness? The modern environment is an ecosystem built upon the exploitation of the human limbic system. Everything you consume, every article, every headline, every advertisement is engineered to trigger your fight-or-flight response or your reward-seeking circuits. It is a biological harvest. We are being farmed for our attention, and the farmer has no interest in our actualization. The environment wants you anxious, reactive, and compliant. It wants you to feel the constant, nagging itch of missing out, because an itchy, reactive mind is one that will never stop turning the page, clicking the link, or buying the remedy. How do we erect the gates? We must employ recursive introspection. If the environment is the source of the noise, then the gatekeeper is the will. You must ask, what is allowed to enter? The process is simple, yet brutal. It requires a policy of extreme filtering. Think of this as the law of exclusionary sovereignty. For every piece of information that enters your mind, there is a cost. The cost is not just the time spent reading or watching. It is the space in your mental RAM that is occupied. When you fill your mind with the garbage of the day, you are not just staying up to date. You are polluting your workspace with toxic chemicals. To think clearly, you must first clear the chamber. This requires a rigorous audit of your inputs. You must be willing to offend the world by ignoring it. You must be willing to look uninformed to the crowd so that you may remain deeply informed by your own purpose. The master knows that the quality of his output is defined solely by the quality of his inputs. If he feeds his mind with the trivial, he will produce the trivial. If he feeds his mind with the eternal, the profound, and the structural, he will produce greatness. The gatekeeper's duty is not to be polite. The gatekeeper's duty is to be absolute. You are the architect of your own reality, and you must refuse to let the world dump its refuse in the foundation of your mind. In the heart of the great desert, there lived a sculptor who was said to be able to hear the language of the stone. While other artists traveled to the great metropolises to learn the latest techniques and to debate the philosophy of aesthetics in the noisy taverns of the elite, the sculptor remained in his lonely hut. He would go for years without speaking a single word to another human being. When he finally returned to the city to present his work, the critics, men of loud voices and flamboyant robes, were baffled. "Where did you study?" they demanded. "Who are your masters? What influence has shaped your hand?" The sculptor said nothing. He simply pulled the veil from his statue. It was a figure of such profound humanity, such intricate detail, and such unsettling grace that the critics fell silent. They had seen 1,000 statues in the city, polished by the vanity of the masters, but they had never seen a piece that felt as though it had been pulled from the very soul of the world. One of the critics, a man who spent his life analyzing the works of others, grew frustrated by the sculptor's silence. "You have no community," he cried. "You have no news of the world. How can you create such a masterpiece in total isolation? Don't you realize that art requires the stimulation of the city? That the pulse of the crowd is the pulse of the inspiration?" The sculptor finally looked at him, his eyes reflecting the vast, unbroken horizon of the desert. "You," he whispered, "are so full of the noise of the city that you cannot hear the stone. You spend your life trying to emulate the shadows on the wall, but you do not see the light. I did not isolate myself to flee from life. I isolated myself to protect my ears. When you hear the voices of 1,000 critics, you can no longer hear the truth of the block. When I was in the desert, there was only the wind, the sun, and the stone. There was no opinion of the stone. There was only the stone itself." The sculptor had understood the law of the gatekeeper. By shielding his environment, he had not emptied his mind. He had purified it. He had allowed the profound silence to reveal the essence of his work. He was the master of his reality because he had decided that the opinion of the world was a currency he would not spend. The world is screaming for your approval, your attention, and your validation. It is time to close the gates. Tomorrow, engage in a total input fast. For the entire day, you are to consume 0 news, 0 social media, and 0 trivial opinions. You are to be a ghost in the digital world. If you must work, work with intent. But outside of your labor, you are to protect your mind as you would a wounded child. If you feel the itch to check the digital pulse, stop, take a breath, and ask, "Is this serving the cathedral I am building?" If the answer is no, kill the impulse. By the end of this day, you will feel a terrifying, beautiful void. That void is where the new self lives. That void is where your own thoughts, your own intuition, and your own power are hiding, waiting for the noise to dissipate so they can finally speak to you. You have now learned to secure your perimeter. You have learned that your attention is a sacred asset, guarded by the gatekeeper of your will. But what happens when the wall is secure? What happens when you are finally alone with your purpose? Even the strongest fortress can crumble if the internal mechanisms of habit are not aligned with the truth. You have the focus, but do you have the pulse? In the next chapter, we descend into the deepest mystery of all, the law of rhythmic persistence. We will learn how to align the heartbeat of your daily labor with the ancient, unstoppable cadence of the universe itself. The rhythm is not something you create, it is something you discover. The heartbeat is already there. Are you ready to find it? Stand at the edge of the shore where the land surrenders to the infinite, rhythmic pulse of the ocean. Observe the tide. It does not rush. It does not panic. It does not despair during the long receding hours of the ebb. It is a force of absolute, terrifying inevitability. It moves with a cadence that predates the emergence of man and will endure long after the last of our monuments have crumbled into dust. This is the pulse of the universe, the law of rhythmic persistence. Now, contrast this with the internal landscape of the modern soul. We are creatures of frenzy and collapse. We live in the jagged peaks and deep, dark valleys of emotional volatility. We wake in a fever of motivation, that dangerous, ephemeral chemical surge, and charge at our goals with the force of a battering ram. We work until our nerves are frayed, our spirit is thin, and our faith is fractured. Then, inevitably, the fuel of our enthusiasm burns away, leaving us in a state of stagnant apathy. We collapse. We retreat. We stare at the calendar and wonder why, despite our best efforts, we remain trapped in the same decaying cycle. The paradox is cruel. We believe that intensity is the mother of success, yet intensity is the parent of exhaustion. We are like an engine that accelerates to the point of structural failure, only to slam on the brakes, over and over, until the machine itself is shattered. We move with thunder, yet we travel little distance. We mistake the dramatic, fleeting burst of effort for the steady, quiet, unstoppable march of the tide. We are, quite literally, working against the grain of reality. The universe functions by rhythm, by the alternating currents of exertion and replenishment, of seed time and harvest. By fighting this order, we do not just lose time, we lose our very capacity to manifest. You are exhausted not because you have worked too hard, but because you have worked in contradiction to the heartbeat of the world. Why is the human ego so profoundly addicted to the cycle of frenzy and collapse? And how does the law of rhythmic persistence dismantle this cycle to unlock permanent power? Why do we choose the sprint over the stride? The human ego is fundamentally impatient. It views the slow, steady accumulation of progress as a form of non-existence. It craves the win, the visible, immediate proof of its own worth. Frenzy provides the ego with the sensation of importance. When you are rushing, when you are stressed, when you are overwhelmed, your ego tells you, I am essential. I am doing something that matters. You are essentially seducing yourself with the feeling of chaos. You equate the agitation of your nervous system with the importance of your mission. This is a profound error of perception. The ego despises rhythm because rhythm requires humility. To persist rhythmically is to accept that your harvest is not immediate. It is a vow of faith in a process that is invisible in the present moment. How does the principle of rhythmic persistence transform exertion into evolution? Recursive inquiry reveals that true mastery is not found in the act, but in the rhythm of the act. Consider the nature of habit. If you do something once, it is an event. If you do it twice, it is an experiment. If you do it with a rhythmic frequency, it becomes a law of your existence. This is the law of cosmic habit force. Every time you perform an action with the intention of purpose, you carve a groove into the landscape of your subconscious mind. The why of persistence is simple: to outlast the friction of the world. Every worthy pursuit encounters the resistance of the middle, that stage where the initial excitement has vanished. The goal still seems distant, and the difficulty appears insurmountable. This is where the ordinary man quits, interpreting the silence of the process as a rejection of his aim. The master, however, recognizes that this resistance is not a wall, but a whetstone. He persists, not because he is immune to fatigue, but because he has aligned his effort with the rhythm of the tide. He understands that growth is often invisible until the very moment of eruption. By persisting rhythmically, you shift the burden of progress from your willpower, which is a finite, brittle resource, to the law itself. Once the rhythm is established, you no longer have to decide to act. The rhythm acts through you. You become the instrument, and the law becomes the player. In the ancient city of Oros, there lived two masters, a weaver and a stonecutter. The weaver was known for the finest tapestries in the realm, while the stonecutter was commissioned to carve the massive, impenetrable gates of the city wall. The weaver worked with a rhythm that seemed almost musical. He would sit at his loom, his hands moving with a fluid, steady cadence. He never hurried, he never faltered, and he never stopped. His neighbors often ridiculed him, saying, "Why do you sit there for hours, repeating the same motion? Why not pull the threads faster? Why not finish it in a single day?" The weaver would only smile and continue his shuttle. He knew that if he pulled the threads with too much force, he would snap them. If he moved too slowly, the pattern would lose its tension. His work was a masterpiece, not because of the speed, but because of the consistency of the tension. He persisted in a rhythm that allowed the threads to weave themselves into a fabric of unbreakable strength. The stonecutter, on the other hand, was a man of brute force. When he faced the mountain of stone, he would strike it with a heavy mallet, screaming in exertion, trying to shatter the rock in a single blow. He would work for a week in a frenzy, leaving the stone untouched, then collapse in exhaustion for a month. He hated the stone. He fought it. He saw the resistance of the granite as a personal insult. Years later, the weaver had produced a library of tapestries that would adorn the palaces of kings for centuries. His rhythm had built a legacy. The stonecutter, however, had only a pile of broken mallets and a mountain of rock that remained as defiant as the day he began. He had died in bitterness, convinced that the stone was too hard and that he had been unlucky. He had never understood that the secret was not in the strength of the arm, but in the persistence of the rhythm. Had he struck the stone with the weaver's consistency, a light, rhythmic tap, day after day, year after year, he would have eventually split the mountain. The stonecutter had failed because he lacked the one thing the weaver possessed in abundance, the patience of the tide. You have lived as the stonecutter, fighting the mountain with frantic, wasted blows. You are now to become the weaver. You must establish a rhythmic anchor. Choose one daily act that is directly tied to your chief aim. It does not need to be a grand gesture. It must be a rhythmic one. It could be writing one page of your book, or studying one chapter of a new skill, or spending 30 minutes in dedicated creative output. You are to perform this act at the exact same time every single day. The goal is not to produce a masterpiece in 24 hours. The goal is to make the act an inseparable part of your biology. When the urge to skip arises, and it will, you must interpret that resistance as the resistance of the middle. You are not to fight it with willpower. You are to bypass it with rhythm. You simply show up, perform the act, and retreat. You are building the groove. Within 90 days, you will find that the groove has become a channel, and the channel has become a river. You will have outpaced every sprint artist in your field, not by running, but by never stopping. You have now built the internal architecture, a defined goal, a controlled focus, a gated environment, and a sustaining rhythm. But even the best laid plans can fall victim to the great deception if you do not understand the hidden mechanism that bridges the gap between your morning preparation and your daily performance. You have the map, but how do you drive the chariot without losing your soul to the speed? The final secret awaits. We are now prepared to discuss the master key, the ritual of the hour of power. It is the crucible where all these laws fuse into a single, devastatingly effective habit. The morning is not just a time. It is the command center of your destiny. Prepare yourself. The gate is about to open. Observe the path through the forest, worn deep by the passage of 1,000 feet. It is not a path because the earth is different there. It is a path because the repetition of a specific motion has altered the terrain. The grass has surrendered, the soil has compacted, and the way forward has become the path of least resistance. Now, consider the architecture of your own life. Your habits are that path. Whether you are walking toward the heights of your potential or spiraling down into the swamp of the status quo, you are walking upon a trail that your own repeated actions have laid down. There is a terrifying, beautiful paradox in this. We are the only creatures on earth who can consciously design the grooves in which we walk. Yet, most men go to their graves having never realized they were the ones holding the shovel. Look at your day. Why do you struggle with the same anxieties at noon? Why do you succumb to the same distractions at 3 p.m.? Why does the idea of greatness feel like a mountain to be climbed, rather than a natural expression of who you have become? It is because you are fighting against the invisible current of your own established patterns. You are trying to be a lion while you have built the path of a sheep. The world calls this willpower, and they celebrate it as the supreme human virtue. But willpower is a brittle, dying ember. It flickers and fades under the slightest breeze of stress. What you are witnessing in the high performer is not a triumph of willpower. It is a triumph of cosmic habit force. He has simply stopped fighting his own nature and has instead sculpted a nature that makes his excellence inevitable. The forest does not struggle to grow. It follows the design of the seed. You are a biological machine designed to automate your success. The tragedy is that you have automated your mediocrity. To understand cosmic habit force, one must penetrate the veil of the subconscious and confront the mechanism that governs human behavior. The law of compounding action. Why does the mind crave the groove? The mind is an energy conservation engine. It is physically structured to automate repetitive processes to save cognitive fuel. When you perform a task once, the brain must fire a complex, energy-expensive web of neurons. When you perform that same task 10,000 times, the neural pathways myelinate, they become insulated, lightning-fast conduits that allow the action to occur with almost zero conscious effort. This is the physiological basis of autopilot. How does this habit force become cosmic? It becomes cosmic when the habit aligns with the fundamental laws of nature. When your small, daily repetitions are no longer isolated acts, but are instead anchored into the broader, unstoppable cycles of growth. When you persist in a behavior, you are literally altering the structure of your reality. You are creating a cosmic habit force, a momentum that exists independent of your mood, your energy levels, or your external circumstances. Recursive inquiry shows us the trap. Most men try to change their behavior by changing their decision. They say, "I will be different tomorrow." But a decision is a point. A habit is a line. A decision exists in the present. A habit exists in the future. To hack this, you must stop focusing on the what and start focusing on the rhythm. If you seek to change your life, you do not need more willpower. You need a more disciplined trigger. You must design a system where your environment, your prompts, and your rewards are so perfectly aligned that you are nudged into excellence. This is the deeper philosophy. You do not conquer yourself. You re-engineer yourself. You are not a static object. You are a process. If you can control the inputs of your daily rhythm, the specific thoughts you think at dawn, the specific tasks you prioritize, the specific silence you guard, you are essentially programming your future self. You are building a machine that runs without you. You are creating a version of you that will continue to climb even when you feel like quitting. You are turning the law of inertia into the law of momentum. There was once a young man who sought to become the greatest archer in the world. He traveled to a remote temple where a master archer sat in silence, staring at the target 100 paces away. For the first year, the master did not allow the boy to touch a bow. He told him to simply stand in the courtyard and perform the motion of drawing the string over and over until the sun rose and until it set. The boy grew weary. "Master," he complained, "I came to shoot arrows, not to mime the motion of the wind." The master said, "You are not drawing the string. You are building the nerve." The second year, the boy was allowed to hold the bow, but still, he was not allowed to loose an arrow. He spent his days in the rain, in the heat, in the biting cold, pulling the string until his calluses grew thick as iron. By the third year, his arms were no longer his own. They had become the bow. When the master finally handed him the arrow, the boy did not think. He did not aim. He did not focus. His body simply performed the rhythm that had been etched into his bones for 3 years. He loosed the arrow, and it struck the center of the target with a sound like a thunderclap. The boy turned to the master in shock. "Did you see? I struck it perfectly." The master did not look at the target. He looked at the boy's hands. "You did not strike the target," the master said. "The target merely surrendered to the habit." The young archer had discovered the truth of cosmic habit force. He had not mastered the act of shooting. He had mastered the architecture of his own body. He had turned the target into an inevitability. By the time he faced a true enemy, his muscles were so perfectly conditioned that his victory was already written in his biology. He had survived the boredom, he had survived the fatigue, and he had survived the desire to rush. He had become an instrument of the law. You have been trying to loose arrows without building the nerve. You have been trying to conquer the target without respecting the groove. It is time to stop the struggle and start the programming. Select one keystone habit, a single, small action that, when done, makes all other positive behaviors easier. It could be 10 minutes of intense study, a specific exercise, or the practice of silence we have discussed. You are to commit to this habit for 30 days, with one non-negotiable rule: never miss twice. If you miss once, it is a human error. If you miss twice, it is the beginning of a new, mediocre habit. When you feel the urge to deviate, look at your life as an engineer looks at a machine. You are not failing. You are simply witnessing the resistance of the old path. Re-enter the groove. Do not punish yourself. Simply return to the rhythm. By the end of the 30 days, you will notice that the effort of the habit has vanished. You will feel a strange discomfort if you do not perform the act. That is the moment the machine takes over. That is the moment you have tapped into cosmic habit force. You have now built the internal machinery of a master. You have the vision, the focus, the gait, the rhythm, and now, the automatic habit force. But there is one final, critical missing link. All these tools are useless if you do not know how to start your day. The critical, foundational hour that decides whether you are a predator or a prey in the marketplace of life. You have the design, now you need the ignition. In the next chapter, we enter the sanctuary of the dawn. We will unveil the hour of power, the ritual that has been the hidden engine behind every empire ever built. Your morning is about to become a monument. Are you prepared to command the sunrise? The world is shrouded in the indigo veil of the pre-dawn. It is the hour when the earth holds its breath, waiting for the first fracture of light to shatter the silence. In your home, the air is cool, still, and pregnant with possibility. This moment, this tiny sliver of time before the sun breaches the horizon, is the most profound threshold in the human experience. It is the sacred null, the space where the chaos of yesterday has dissolved and the demands of today have yet to crystallize. Consider the paradox. You are standing at the absolute center of your own sovereignty, yet most men flee this moment as if it were a physical threat. They rise and immediately reach for the digital umbilical cord, the phone, the inbox, the noise of the digital hive. They surrender their autonomy before they have even fully opened their eyes, trading the limitless potential of the dawn for the frantic, reactive crumbs of other people's agendas. They believe they are getting ahead, but they are actually forfeiting the battle before the first shot is fired. The scene is one of stark, unyielding truth. You sit in your designated command center, a simple chair, a closed door, the absence of electronic interference. This is not a meditative escape. This is a military operation. You are reclaiming the territory of your soul. The silence is not empty. It is dense with the architecture of your destiny. To occupy this space, to breathe the air of the early morning with intention, is to declare war on the default settings of the human condition. It is a rebellion against the drift. It is the moment where you cease to be a biological response to the world and become the author of the day's script. To grasp the mechanics of the silent decision, one must look at the neurology of the transition from sleep to waking, the window where the subconscious and conscious minds are most fluid. Why does the morning carry such disproportionate power? The mind, upon waking, exists in a state of alpha and theta brainwave activity, the same frequencies associated with high-level learning and hypnosis. Your subconscious is, in this moment, a blank slate, highly suggestible, and stripped of the defensive cynicism that coats the brain by midday. If you do not plant the seeds of your purpose here, the world will plant the seeds of your distraction. You are at the most vulnerable and the most powerful point of your cycle. How does the silent decision function as a lever for the entire day? We must ask recursively, why must the decision be silent? Because the voice of the world is loud. To hear the voice of your own intent, you must dampen the external frequency. The silent decision is the process of defining the one thing. Most men fail not because they lack effort, but because they suffer from decision fatigue. By mid-morning, their ability to choose the vital task is eroded by 1,000 minor, inconsequential choices. What to eat, what to answer, where to look. The silent decision solves this by pre-deciding. It is a form of cognitive automation. You are not trying to choose the right path at 10:00 a.m. You have already burned that bridge. You are merely executing the mandate you issued in the clarity of the dawn. This is the how of leadership. It is the art of separating the general, who decides in the quiet tent, from the soldier who executes on the bloody field. If you do not act as your own general at 5:00 a.m., you will be a casualty by 5:00 p.m. The silent decision is the act of drawing the lines of the battlefield before the enemy arrives. It is the psychological act of cutting off, the etymological root of decider, all options that do not serve your chief aim. In the annals of the great navigators, there is the legend of Admiral Thorn. Thorn was famous not for the number of ships he commanded, but for his ability to navigate the most treacherous, fog-shrouded straits in the world waters, where other captains would lose their entire fleets to the jagged reefs. When asked his secret, Thorn would always point to a small, unassuming brass compass he kept in his cabin. He called it his silent arbiter. Every morning, before the crew awoke and before the winds rose, Thorn would enter his cabin and lock the door. He would place the compass on his table, stare into its needle, and spend an hour mapping the day's route. He did not look at the maps provided by the cartographers or listen to the rumors of the sailors about where the gold was hidden. He looked only at the needle. One day, his first mate, a man of great ambition but little wisdom, crept into the cabin. He saw the admiral staring at the needle and thought he had discovered a magical secret. He stole the compass, believing that as long as he carried it, the ocean would obey him. But when the first storm hit, the mate was lost. He held the compass, but he did not have the discipline of the morning. He had the tool, but he had not performed the decision. He did not know how to read the needle in the context of the day's changing currents because he had not spent the quiet hour aligning his own mind with the direction of the magnet. Thorn, on the other hand, never needed the physical compass again. He had performed the ritual of the silent decision so many times that the direction was etched into his spirit. When the fog rolled in, he did not panic. He navigated by the internal alignment he had forged in the quiet of his cabin. The crew realized then that the secret was never the brass tool. It was the hour of solitude. The admiral had conquered the ocean because he had first conquered the silence of his own mind. You are the admiral of your own life, but your ship is currently drifting because you have not claimed the cabin. Tomorrow morning, commit to the silent 10. You are to rise 10 minutes before your usual time. You will go to a place where you can be entirely alone. Do not speak, do not read, do not look at a screen. Sit upright, focus your breath. You are to look at the day ahead, not as a series of chores, but as a series of strategic maneuvers. Identify the one thing, the single outcome that, if achieved, makes the day a victory. Write that outcome down. Then, sit in the silence and envision yourself having completed it. Feel the weight of the pen in your hand, the satisfaction of the mark on the page. You are not hoping for success. You are issuing an order to the universe. When you stand up and leave that room, you are not a person looking for things to do. You are a person executing a preordained victory. This is the foundation. You have set the direction. But a decision without a vision is a skeleton without flesh. You have the command, but you need the fuel. In the next chapter, we move into the second phase of the hour of power, the vision of completion. We will learn how to turn your decision into a sensory reality so potent that your own brain will become a magnet for the results you seek. The blueprint is drawn. Now we begin the construction. Are you ready to see the invisible become visible? The sun has begun to crest the horizon, bleeding a raw, auroral gold into the gray silence of the morning. You are still in your command center, the air heavy with the scent of unspent potential. The silent decision has been made. The target is set. But look at the anatomy of your ambition. It is currently a ghost, a mere spark of intent residing in the ephemeral chambers of your mind. If you do not breathe life into this spark, if you do not clothe it in the sensory flesh of reality, it will flicker and die the moment you step out into the discordant clamor of the world. There is a profound, challenging paradox here. You possess the power to move mountains, yet you feel like a captive of your circumstances. Why? Because you are trying to build the skyscraper of your life without first seeing it finished in the sanctuary of your imagination. You believe that seeing is believing, but the master knows that this is the logic of the slave. The master knows that believing the act of vividly perceiving the completed result is the only way to make the world see. Look at the space before you. It is filled with the raw, invisible substance of thought. You are a painter with no canvas but the future, and you are currently hesitating to lift the brush. The hesitation is not a lack of capability. It is a failure of vision. You have not yet dared to fully occupy the reality you intend to inhabit. To witness the world conform to your will, you must first master the art of the inner projection. You are about to engage in the most dangerous, beautiful, and essential labor of the human spirit, the creation of the future within the fortress of the present. To grasp the mechanics of the vision of completion, one must move beyond the superficial definition of visualization. We are not speaking of idle daydreams. We are speaking of the deliberate neurological programming of the self. Why does the brain struggle to bridge the gap between intention and action? The subconscious mind, the tireless engine that runs the biological machinery of your body, does not distinguish between a vividly imagined event and a physical experience. The amygdala, the seat of your emotional response, reacts to the image of a threat or a triumph with the same biochemical intensity as the reality of one. The reason you procrastinate is that your brain perceives your unstarted goal as an unknown, and the brain is hardwired to fear the unknown. You are experiencing a cognitive freeze because you have not lived the successful execution of your task. How does the vision of completion serve as a memory of the future? We use the recursive method to see the truth. If fear is an imagined negative future, then faith must be an imagined positive future. By spending 15 minutes in the vision of completion, you are constructing a neural map of your success. When you perform this act with sensory detail, hearing the sounds of your success, feeling the relief of the task being finished, seeing the room, smelling the air, you are encoding a memory. You are effectively tricking your nervous system into believing you have already done it. When you finally step into the physical day to do the work, your brain no longer encounters the unknown. It encounters the familiar. You have removed the friction of fear because you have already traversed the path. The task that once seemed like a daunting mountain now feels like a simple, inevitable walk to a destination you have visited 1,000 times in your mind. This is the alchemy of the master. He does not work to achieve. He works to remember the victory he has already finalized. There was once a master architect in the lands of the East, a man named Hiroshi, who was tasked by the emperor to build a palace that would stand for a millennium. The emperor brought Hiroshi to a barren, scorched field and demanded, "Build me a palace that will humble the gods." Hiroshi did not call for masons. He did not order lumber. He did not break ground. For 40 days, he sat in the middle of that barren field, his eyes closed. He sat through the scorching heat of the noon sun and the shivering cold of the midnight wind. The workers grew restless. The emperor grew impatient. "Why do you sit there while the seasons turn?" the emperor shouted. "I gave you a task, not a vacation." Hiroshi finally opened his eyes. He pointed to the empty space before them and said, "I have already lived in these halls, my emperor. I have walked through the great foyer. I have felt the cool air of the inner courtyard. I have seen the way the light hits the floor at dusk. The palace is already finished. Now, I simply need to invite the stone to take its place." Hiroshi then took a piece of charcoal and, in minutes, drew the most complex, perfect blueprint the emperor had ever seen. The construction that followed was not a struggle. It was an act of obedience. The stone seemed to fall into place. The wood seemed to bend to his will. Because Hiroshi had already inhabited the building, every mistake, every structural flaw, and every aesthetic choice had been resolved in the theater of his mind long before the first tool was lifted. The palace was not built, it was merely unveiled. The master architect had mastered the vision of completion, and the material world had no choice but to manifest the truth he had already proven in his soul. You have stood in your own field for far too long, staring at the dust and wondering why the palace refuses to rise. It is time to enter the sanctuary. Following your silent decision, you will enter the phase of vision. Set your timer for 15 minutes. Close your eyes. Do not just see the work, be in the work. If your task is a presentation, see yourself standing before the audience. Feel the steadiness of your own voice. Hear the silence of the room as they listen, entranced. Feel the rush of gratitude as you realize you have succeeded. When you feel the familiar pull of doubt or the sting of "this is just a dream," lean into the emotion of the success. Let that emotion burn. You are not daydreaming, you are cementing a neurological reality. By the time the timer rings, your body should be humming with a sense of inevitability. You will feel a residual tension, a hunger to make the reality match the vision. That is the engine of your productivity. You have now mastered the decision and the vision. You have the map, and you have experienced the destination. But the most dangerous moment is still ahead. The moment you leave this room and re-enter the chaotic, gravity-filled world of other people's needs. You have the fuel, but how do you arrange it into a container that survives the heat of the day? We now arrive at the final, mechanical phase of the hour of power, the planning of rhythm. We will take the ethereal, burning vision you have just created and lock it into a schedule that cannot be broken. The architecture of your day is about to be set in stone. Prepare yourself, for you are about to build the cage that sets you free. The sun has climbed to its zenith, casting the world in a harsh, unforgiving light. You stand at the precipice of the afternoon, the hours of the morning already beginning to blur into the history of the day. Around you, the gears of the world are grinding in their endless, frantic cycle. Men and women are rushing, breathless and perspiring, their eyes darting toward the ticking hands of the clock as if it were a predator pursuing them. They live in a state of perpetual debt, a debt of time they can never repay, a debt of potential they can never honor. Consider the terrifying paradox of our condition. Time is the only resource that is truly finite, yet it is the only resource we squander with the reckless abandon of a gambler who believes the house will always grant him another chip. We treat time as a tyrant, a cruel master that demands our servitude, never realizing that it is the most obedient servant in the universe. Time does not flee, it waits. It does not hasten. It flows with the indifferent grace of the stars. The struggle you feel, the frantic pulse of the heart, the clawing anxiety of being behind, these are not the properties of time. They are the symptoms of an internal state that has lost its center. You are the only person who can define the dimensions of your hours. The clock on the wall is a neutral observer. It records the passage of the sun, but it does not dictate the depth of your living. The master realizes that he is not a passenger on the ship of time, but the navigator. He does not fear the coming night, for he has filled the hours of the day with the architecture of purpose. He has turned the fleeting, vaporous moments of existence into solid bricks of achievement. He has unlocked the master key. To grasp the master key to time, one must dismantle the false construct of time management. We have been lied to by an age that believes time can be saved or squeezed like water into a sponge. Why does the standard philosophy of time management fail so spectacularly? It fails because it focuses on the quantity of tasks rather than the quality of existence. It treats the human life as a container to be filled with as much activity as possible. This is the logic of the laborer, not the creator. When you focus on getting more done, you are merely accelerating your own obsolescence. You are teaching your brain to prioritize the urgent over the essential, creating a feedback loop of reactivity that keeps you perpetually drained and profoundly stagnant. How does the master key, the hour of power, reverse this cycle? Through recursive thinking, we see that the hour of power is not a task, it is the alignment of the self. By dedicating the first 60 minutes of the day to the silent decision, the vision of completion, and the planning of rhythm, you are performing a preemptive strike against the chaos of the world. You are utilizing the law of leverage. Just as a small shift in the rudder of a ship at the harbor determines whether it reaches the far coast or founders on the rocks, the shift you make in the first hour of your day determines the destination of your entire life. You are not managing time, you are governing your nature. You are forcing the day to conform to your internal order. This is the how of the master. He knows that order is the precondition for freedom. He does not seek to do more, he seeks to be more. And in that state of alignment, the more is accomplished as a natural byproduct. He has discovered that when the mind is governed by purpose, the hours cease to be a burden and become the materials of a legacy. Time expands for him because he no longer wastes it in the hesitation of indecision or the confusion of doubt. He has mastered the only time that exists, the eternal, pregnant, and powerful now. In the royal court of an ancient empire, the emperor held a contest to find the man who could best manage the river of hours. 3 men were brought before him, each given a golden vessel of the same size and a pile of precious sand. The first man, a frantic merchant, began pouring his sand into the vessel with such speed that it spilled over the sides, creating a messy, shifting pile. He was so busy trying to pour that he never stopped to look at the shape of the mountain he was creating. He ran out of sand before the sun had even reached midday. The second man, a weary scholar, spent the entire day measuring each grain, counting and sorting the sand to ensure it was perfectly distributed. By the time the moon rose, his vessel was half empty, and he had accomplished nothing but the measuring. He had been so focused on the administration of the sand that he had forgotten to build. The third man, a silent clockmaker, sat before the emperor. He did not touch his vessel for many hours. He sat in silence, watching the play of light against the walls, his hands resting on his knees. The emperor grew angry. "Do you mock me? The day is half over, and you have not poured a single grain." The clockmaker looked up. "I am waiting for the rhythm of the room, Your Majesty." When the shadow of the palace pillar hit a specific stone on the floor, the clockmaker began to move. He did not pour the sand in a frenzy, nor did he measure it with hesitation. He poured it with a slow, deliberate cadence, sculpting the sand into a perfect, miniature replica of the palace itself. He used the sand not to fill a vessel, but to build a vision. When he finished, he had sand left over, and his vessel held a work of art that would last as long as the palace stood. The emperor asked, "How did you manage to do what the others could not?" The clockmaker replied, "They tried to capture time by force or by calculation. I did not try to capture time at all. I simply aligned my labor with the truth of the moment. I did not work harder than them. I worked from a place where the time was already mine. You have arrived at the threshold of your own mastery. The tools are in your hands, the blueprint is drawn, and the gate is open. The master key to time is not a secret you possess, it is a discipline you practice. Starting tomorrow, you must treat your first hour as a covenant with your own potential. You have the three phases: the silent decision, the vision of completion, and the planning of rhythm. These are not optional. If you are serious about leaving the drifters behind, you will treat this hour as the most important appointment of your life, an appointment you would never dream of missing for any client, any boss, or any crisis. You are the commander of your destiny, and the dawn is your command center. Do not fear the difficulty of the change. The resistance you feel is only the friction of your old self, dying so that the new self can be born. Rise. Reclaim your sovereignty. Build the cathedral. You have now learned the laws of definite work, controlled attention, and rhythmic persistence. You have been initiated into the sacred ritual of the hour of power. You are prepared to step out into the world, not as a servant of the clock, but as the master of the day. But wait, this is not the end of your ascent. You have built the vessel, but what will you carry in it? You have the capacity for power. But do you know how to wield the subtle, invisible influence that allows you to move the world without moving a muscle? The next phase of your transformation is about to begin. We move from the mastery of the self to the mastery of the environment, from the architecture of the mind to the architecture of the life. The door is already turning on its hinges. Your greatness is waiting for you to walk through. Are you ready to see what lies beyond?